Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very nice to be here, and I think this is also a lot of attendees today, so it is my pleasure. First of all, thank you for the opportunities for the UNGC Malaysia and also Brunei, and also for other speakers here. So I guess my name is Dedi Mahardika. I am right now part of the CDP as well as the Science Based Targets Initiative. And as mentioned by Jess and also Farouz here, so I guess back then we met during 2020, back when I was working with SBTi, and actually Jess and Farouz organizing some of the capacity building about this SBTi. And yeah, we didn't know that this SBTi could be like really, really big in the past years. So yeah, I think kudos to the organizers today. So today's discussion, I think I will talk mostly about how and also what the companies can do to set the SBTs, and leveraging also some of the best practices in the region. And we will delve into some of the update behind what is actually happening in SBTi here. Yeah, to just refresh you here, in case you're not familiar, I guess to some extent, because you're attending the SBTi Symposium, you will have some idea what is actually SBTi. So as mentioned by Farouz and also the Minister, SBTi is a collaboration between 4 partners of organizations, including me, coming from CDP, but also UN Global Compact, SBTi, and also WWF. The idea was actually to translate the climate science, which is basically what IPCC report told us, and also the UNFCCC, and the SBTi actually being founded in 2015, which is around the time as the Paris Agreement as well. So when we're talking about the commitments within the countries, probably we can already talking about the Paris Agreement, and the equivalent that one to the companies actually is the SBTi. So if the company want to be very Paris aligned, the best practice right now is to align with the SBTi here. Yeah, and in terms of the numbers here, sorry. In terms of the numbers right now, we're just reaching the milestone last month. So globally, we have right now over 5,000 companies. And I think right now it's slightly improved also because we're usually updating this is in a weekly basis. You may see right now that around 5,100 companies already joining the action. And almost half of them are actually being validated. The difference here, of course, is that the 2,700 companies here already validating, submitting their targets, and therefore it is being proven that the targets are in line with the science here. We see also the raise of the net zero commitments. Around 1,800 companies actually are joining the SBTi and committing to have their targets to be in line with the net zero here. And let's go into the global reach here. You may see, I think you're kind of expecting this kind of figure here because SBTi, of course, when we're talking about the global coverage, mostly it's coming from the Europe here. We may see that the Europe covers almost 55%. The number actually might be different because this is coming from the progress report of 2021. We will update the 2022 later this month. But you may see that Europe right now covers for 55%, so almost half of them. But you may see that the Asia as a region right now have a very interesting race in terms of the SBTi. Right now, Asia even surpassing the North America as the one of the leaders in terms of the SBTi implementation here. So of course, this is also based on the market because in terms of the market numbers, Asia have surpassed North America, but also we have a lot of chances, a lot of engagement opportunities, how we can actually leveraging in this case. Yeah, and this is a little bit snapshot of what is actually Malaysian companies doing here. Globally, I think it's also being referred to the previous slide. But in terms of the SBTi in Southeast Asia right now, we have 125 companies and also SMEs joining the initiative. And you may see from the, in terms of the countries that are based in the headquarters right now, Singapore is the leader, of course, probably that is expected, but you have Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia right now are coming forth in terms of the number of commitments here, which is, of course, this is a good sign as well. We may see also similar Many familiar names within here that probably also attending the session. So indeed, this is coming that from the examples that right now the commitments actually are moving forward, and we see a lot of opportunities and also a lot of advance from the Malaysian companies here. Yeah, and let's delve into what are actually the reason why companies joining the SBTi, what are actually the business benefits, and what are the sharing session that already here. The first one is actually a lot of different types of the stakeholders are already asking the companies to act on the climate change here. So we may see here based on the study, not only the shareholders internally or externally, but also consumers, regulators, employee, and also civil society, which means this is the responsibility not only coming from the civil societies that probably campaigning companies to do more action, but also coming from different types of the study here. Interestingly, of course, we see that the employees here between 25 and 40 years old say that her job are actually more fulfilling when they are working in the company that taking the climate action properly. And then the next slide will show you the business case benefits that already being mentioned by the minister also today. What are actually the business benefit of joining SBTi? Of course, it is the idea of SBTi is to seize the opportunity of low carbon transition here. So when you're transitioning to the green technology, you will reap benefits in the near future. But also, there are so many regulatory that are being also overviewed by the previous speaker. And what is the market development in terms of tea here? And competitiveness, of course, because when I see the slide, the previous slide also mentioning that there are so many companies already joining SBTi, and you don't want to miss the opportunity to be able to still compete within your peers in the region or within your sector here. And the next one would be the interesting study also here that are being conducted by Bain and company here. That is actually defining some of the companies into three types of the engagement within the climate action. The first one is actually the pioneer. You may see here, pioneer is of course the early strong commitments to do the climate change as soon as possible. And then the second one is the follower, which is basically undertakes climate change but quite slowly. Lastly, it's a laggard, which is that takes a delayed passive approach here. You may see in the graph that we may not see different here in terms of the 2025 until 2021 until 2025. We may not see any difference of the profit growth between the laggard, pioneer, and also follower. But after 2030, it is clearly stated and also clearly show here that the pioneer will have an increase of the profit growth if we compare to the followers and also laggard. We're talking about the reaching net zero by 2050. It is being proven by the study that the pioneer will have around 25 to 30% profit growth, and closely behind is the follower. But you may see for the laggard, actually, they will not reaching any profit growth. Instead, they will have a loss of the profit by 10 to 20% here. So emphasizing this idea is actually that the company need to take action as early as possible, because you may also want to take benefits as early as possible here. Yeah. After this, let me go into some of the details, how the company actually can join the initiative, which is, I think, most of you are quite familiar with. So the first stage of the joining SBTi is actually to take commitments here. It's pretty straightforward. That's how the company needs to sending the commitment letters to the SBTi, and your name will be showcased in the SBTi website as a committed companies. And after the commitments, you will have around 2 years to develop your targets to be validated, and that's include the development of the target itself and also the submission to the SBTi that are being reviewed by the target validation team. And after the target being validated, you may communicate your target publicly here. So you may see in the SBTi website, there are different types of the company's journey, whether this is still in the commitment letter or in the communication here. And of course, the requirement also is after your target being validated. Of course, there is not the end of your journey. So you need to report the journey. What are the achievement of your emission reduction by disclosing to the public platform like sustainability report or like the CDP climate change questionnaire. Yeah. And this is just to give you a snapshot of what is actually included in the SBTi commitment letter. It is pretty straightforward, actually. I think Jess and her team also will be happy to assist this. So this is basically just giving you the information, basic information, what are your company about, and also there are some commitments to do with whether it's a near-term or long-term science-based target. And overall, the companies who have made a net zero commitment will be included also in the UNFCCC Race to Zero. And for the next slide, this is also the new compliance policy that are happening. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, the company will have 2 years to develop their targets, right? So what is actually happening if the company doesn't deliver their target within 2 years here? So currently we have a new compliance policy. So if the company not delivering their targets by 2 years, there will be a remove commitments here. So right now, I think you may see there are not only committed companies and also validated companies in the website, but also there are remove commitments. So this is to increase the transparency also within the companies and also encouraging the companies to not stop on the commitment stage, but also to validate their targets. Yeah. Oops. This is, I think, a pretty familiar slide deck for you, which is overviewing what are actually the steps going into the SBTi. So there are 4 steps that the company may do if they want to go into the SBTi net zero journey. The very first one is actually to go into the what we call as the near-term science-based targets, which is eventually a target that are in line with 1.5 degrees Celsius and are in line with the 5 to 10 years emission base year approach. The second one is long-term science-based target. Eventually, this is to align your 1.5 scenarios in the long term, which is by no later than 2050 here. So you may see in this slide that the difference between number 1 and number 2 is actually the time frame. So the time frame between number 1 and 2 actually complementary here. And then actually the requirement is to go into number 4 here. You may see in this type of the graph that there are some remaining emission that our company still can do, what we call as the unabated emission, which is basically the emission that almost impossible to be reduced. This amount of the residual emission can be going into the number 4, which is the neutralization of residual emission. So this is going back to the definition of net zero, which is basically netting the amount of emission into the atmosphere with the carbon removals here. And I would like to highlight also the important things about the carbon market that are being highlighted by the previous speaker, that although SBTi right now is not allowing the companies to go into the carbon offsetting, but we are right now developing what we call as the beyond value chain mitigation, which is basically encouraging companies to still invest beyond their value chain mitigation, although it is not included in net zero. So obviously going net zero will be the main priorities, but if the company have the investment important enough, they can also invest to the beyond value chain mitigation here. Yeah, I think I can skip just this one. Happy to discuss this during the session, but there are so many different types of the SBTi sectoral development work right now. So you may already choose different types of the sectoral decarbonization approach, but there are also different types of the sectoral development work. What we're already publishing this year is actually FLAG guidance, which is forest, land use, and agriculture. So for the first time, I think the company that have the land use related emissions can join the initiative, because I think in the previous year we are only focusing on the energy related emissions, but right now we are also developing the forest, land use, and agriculture here, which is pretty critical also to the companies in the region. Yeah, and this is also the SBTi target setting tool. So if you're already having your emissions data calculated, you may use this tool as a way to demonstrate how many emissions you need to reduce here. So this is also a free tool available on the website. You may take a look at this also if it is important for you. And this is also something that probably confused a lot of people, and we got a lot. So what are the SBTi do and does not do here? So the SBTi, as I mentioned, is we provide the basis to validate the company, which are ambitious enough to align with the science by how much and when here, which means that by how much the company need to reduce and by what year here. And we also take consideration of each company uniqueness here. So we usually validate the target based on the company's case, also different individual case into the account. And what SBTi does not provide is actually the roadmap of technologies here. So right now, SBTi is pretty neutral in terms of the technology. As long as it is being proven by science that there is a feasible technology, the company will be pretty free to choose their type of technologies. And also the product level certification, because SBTi is focusing so much on the company level, we're not really providing any product level types of their certification. Yeah, and I have two last slides. Hopefully it's still enough. Just want to highlight the important starting point of the companies here and how you can go into the SBTi journey here. So this is just to give you a brief summary that internal collaboration is the key when you are doing the SBTi here. So firstly, of course, because the SBTi usually going through the commitment stage, there are some announcement of the intent, usually by the CEO and board, and CSO will direct the process to the sustainability team. The second one is to gather the expertise of your own company as much as possible, because of course internal data usually being handled by a lot of different people also in the company. So here you may see different line of the business will need to collaborate to gather the data. And especially this internal collaboration also being supported by the SBTi, GFANS, and other types of the consultant and clients here. And eventually, after you're developing your targets, the CSO will recommend the path forward, and the business units execute the plan to reach the target here. Yeah, and this is the last slide of mine. This is actually the single company's roadmap to better ESG performance that focusing on the E part, the environmental part here. There are 3 steps. The first one is to establish the foundation. Second one is actually to build the capacity. And third one is to improve the performance here. Establishing foundation, of course, important because usually we are encouraging company to disclose their information, mainly to analyze what are actually the gaps that you are having here, whether it's an emission, energy data. You may analyze your overall gaps by disclosing your information. And then, of course, to calculate and report emission here. By calculating and reporting emission, you will also understand what are your hotspots in terms of the emission, and then you can go through that different types of the activities. And then the second step is to build the capacity by setting an emission reduction target. Usually we encourage the company to just set emission reduction targets that are viable for them first, which is not really ambitious. You can start by that one, but by setting an emission reduction target, you will have also an internal target on your own that encourages also to activities that are reducing the emissions. So something like activity to reduce emission report, and also reporting on the purchase of renewable electricity here. And lastly, after you establish the foundation and build the capacity, of course, is how to improve the performance, basically to collaborate with your partners to reduce the emissions, because, of course, SBTi is not only covering your internal or your own emission, but also emission from scope 3 or from suppliers and your partners. So collaboration is key here. And also, of course, the peak will be to set and monitor progress towards the SBTi here. Yeah, I think that's all from my side. It is really good opportunity for me to speak here. Thanks again for the organizers, and I will pass over to the MC. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Dedi, for your presentation and sharing. You may now take your seat.